Hi, welcome back to Cambridge Inside Out. I am Judy Nathans.
And I'm Robert Winters.
This is
And
our
I think we
second
just
half.
we
What?
just we just spent the last half hour
Yeah.
talking about alewife oil. I think
Oh,
in the post-election period, so many people are actually a little more curious about what a few thoughts
yeah.
about the election.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
I'd like to actually show some of that right now.
Sure.
Let me just say right up front, though, that the way I am, yes, there was some turnover in the sense that well, Tim Toomey was retiring from the city council,
If the
and
open
Paul
seat.
Toner
Mhm.
essentially took Toomey's seat.
Yeah.
And there was one not one incumbent, Jivan Sabrina Wheeler, who
Mhm.
was not reelected,
Mhm.
but a person, Burhan Azim, was elected. Basically, we replaced him. So that's really
Mhm.
the
The big changes.
long and short of it. There are some
Yeah.
other things I want to talk about as well.
Okay.
Um, and there are some lessons to be learned there. I would say that the real overriding story of this election, in my view, still comes, at least on the city council side, comes down to the dominant role that incumbency continues to play
Yeah.
in this election, really most elections.
Hmm.
You know, people there, I'm sure there are various people who are going to try and spin this to sort of say, well, we consider this a mandate for this, that, or the other thing. But honestly, no, just not, there's just
People
nothing.
vote on what's who they know and what's happened, and
Right, and
it's
incumbents
very
are
hard to
better
break into
known.
that. Sure.
It really is, and
Yeah.
you can, and in a COVID kind of world too, where you
Oh
have a
yeah.
lot less opportunity to really kind of get
Yeah.
your name and your presence out there. It's even better, works very well for the incumbents, and I think that's really the primary story here. You know, um, there was the other story, and I'll actually get to the facts and figures in a moment here, but
Mm.
the other story too is that, if you are elected, like Mr. Sabrina Wheeler was 2 years ago,
Mhm.
and you do not have a natural base, because basically if you're relatively new to town,
Right.
you have to be a little bit selfish as a candidate and build up your base of
Yeah.
number one voters. And if you want to run as a movement candidate who's trying to
Yeah.
elect a lot of movement
Yeah.
candidates, to accompany you, that kind of flies in the face of the reality of how it works, especially in a proportional representation election, where
Yeah.
you know the people who are most similar to you will be the ones most likely to defeat you. And that's fundamentally what happened. We could argue, I think, I would argue that 2 years ago, Burhan Azim, as part of the ABC grouping,
Mhm.
was there as a feeder who helped elect
Mm.
Sabrina Wheeler to
Yeah.
the council. 2 years later, Sabrina Wheeler was there. People, I'm sure a lot of voters were thinking, "Oh, we like this young kid, Burhan Azim. Let's give him the number one vote."
Oh,
You
you
know,
think it was a choice between him or Jivan? I don't know. I don't
no,
see it
it's
that
not.
way.
It's not as simple as that ever. But
No.
but
Yeah.
in terms of the margins that make the
True.
difference between winning and not winning,
Yeah.
yes, I think it's exactly the point.
But also,
Um,
I wonder how many of Jivan's votes last time were people that maybe aren't around anymore. Or they were
that
people,
well, that's true
grad
too.
school and stuff. And it's true with Burhan too, I guess. But
Right. So
so there you can't
yeah,
count
yeah,
on that.
yeah. So
Huh?
you have both
Yeah.
of them, I think, are in a situation
Right.
where they could very well be one-term type
Hmm. Yeah.
counselors, unless they make an effort to reach out and
Yeah.
expand the base. And
Yeah.
maybe Baran will do that if he's sticking around here. I don't know if he is. So
I think he's been here. Yeah. Whatever. I
well, he
don't
was here during his time as an MIT student. That was four
know. Right.
years, and then
Right.
2 years since. So
Only
and
24,
but being
folks.
an
So,
MIT students,
yeah.
what that usually means
Yeah.
is for the first 3 years, you
Yeah.
don't really know what
Yeah.
lies beyond the Grand Junction Railroad tracks,
Yeah.
like, oh my God, we ventured into, what's that,
Yeah.
Central Square?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, that's like foreign,
But then
so
again, MIT spawns many, new ventures, and people stay and they become part of the community. So,
uh,
yeah,
I'm one of them. I'm definitely one of them.
yeah, yeah,
I
that's
came
good.
here and I was a graduate student there. So,
Yeah.
it's pretty common. There's a lot of people,
Hmm.
who fit that category, but if you want to make it in politics, you can't just be
I
the
know.
pretty new face. And you have to
No.
kind of build a base and
You can't
and
just be with
and
the Democratic Socialists of America or our revolution or,
yeah,
I don't
yeah.
think Burhan was in as many groups as maybe Juvan was. Maybe I
Yeah,
could be.
it's actually I want to get to the data here in a minute. I'm actually going to
Okay.
see
Yeah.
something that I don't have posted, but this is like late breaking news. Actually,
Oh,
this,
late breaking
this
news.
is
Okay,
this is
let's go.
information I just scrawled on here when I was first looking at the
Okay.
ballot data Friday
All
night,
right.
Saturday morning.
Yeah.
Which is, people keep talking about these slates. The
Yes. Yes.
ABC slate, the CCC slate, the
Right.
ORC, and the Cambridge Residents
Cambridge
Alliance.
Residents
And
Alliance.
then there
Right.
was a late edition called the Justice League or
Oh,
something with
that's a Marvel Comics.
well, whatever it is. It was something that involved Zondervan and Sabrina Wheeler.
Oh, all
Basically,
right.
it's another
Environmental,
variant. No,
environmental
I
justice. No.
wouldn't. Yeah, I don't know really what it is. I mean, I do have
Okay.
I do
I
have a
didn't get that. I
flyer.
know you said there was a flyer. I don't think I saw that. I
Yeah,
didn't get
yeah,
it.
there was a flyer. They call themselves
What do they
the
call them?
Justice Coalition of Cambridge for
I don't.
Cambridge,
When did that come
right?
out?
Very late in the game, and I think it was really something put together by Zondervan because he was not really, you
Yeah,
know,
in a lot of places. Yeah.
yeah. So,
Who
but
was on that?
whatever.
Who did they
Um,
endorse?
well, this one here was Tonia Hicks,
Yeah,
Zondervan, Burhan Azim, Theodora Skiatis, and Jivan Sabrina Wheeler.
that sounds like the Cambridge Residents Alliance. Huh?
They have some in
Similar.
common, to be
Yeah.
sure. But here's
Yeah.
let me just say this, and then I
Yeah,
want
go ahead.
to
Yeah.
flash a bunch of tables and stuff at people.
Mhm.
All right, so to whatever degree you want to believe in slates,
Yeah.
let me first say here that it's very, very hard to draw conclusions. And part of the
Mhm.
reason is that if you have a slate like the ABC slate, a Better Cambridge, that
Mhm.
has 5 incumbents, including Sumbul Siddiqui, who did spectacularly well,
Yes.
that
Yes.
completely biases any interpretation,
True.
because wow, in other words, your success is based on the fact that you had a lot of incumbents,
Yeah.
so if you want to try and spin that as a mandate, sorry, it doesn't
Yeah.
work.
Yeah.
So here's a few numbers. They were like, was it something in the vicinity of 22,000 people voted
That's
for
what you
city
said.
council,
Yeah.
21,814.
Yeah.
Okay. So, just a little bit less than it was 2 years ago. So it's
Okay.
comparable to 2 years ago. Okay. So here's a quiz question. How many people, because the ABC slate consisted of 9, right? He holds up,
Okay. Yeah.
and I hold up the right
I don't
number
know.
for
I guess so. I don't.
9
Yeah.
candidates. So how many total loyalists were there who voted the full ABC slate before anything else? It's actually higher than I thought they would be. It was 581 people did that.
Wait, how did you figure that out?
I have the ballot data. I just look. I just read it.
Well, what? And what are you saying that you could see by the way they voted? Like,
Yeah, I could just look at the ballot. I said, in the first choice, were you
yeah.
one of these 9? On the second choice, were you one of these 9? The third choice.
Oh,
And
I
then I
get it.
basically said, and how many
581
ballots?
out of
581 were
out of
100% loyal slate voters.
okay.
Now remember though, it's hard to get 9 out of 9 of them, right? Okay,
That's
so
right.
that we're talking real loyalists now, right?
Yes.
Okay, if you contrast that with the Cambridge Citizens Coalition,
The Suzanne Blier and the whole.
yeah,
group.
etc.
Yeah, okay.
The number of people who voted, they only had 4
They
candidates
had
on their
4.
slate.
That's right. Yeah.
So how many ballots basically put, the 4 CCC
I would
candidates?
guess not that many.
607. So there were actually
Real
more of
more.
those.
Oh, that's fascinating.
But don't jump to conclusions.
All right.
The fact is, you're only getting 4. I could just as easily contrast that with how many people ranked ABC candidates in the first 4 positions. And the answer to that is slightly over 3,000.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. But again, remember, there's a lot of Siddiqui voters in there. There's a lot of incumbents in there. So basically, if you voted for 4 ABC incumbents, then that's where many of those 3,000 ballots are. So it's a very confounding factor that makes it incredibly difficult to draw any conclusions.
What about the CCC first?
Well, let's see. well, if the number of people who voted the Cambridge residence lines had 7,
Oh.
there were 204 people voted 1 through 7 for them.
Hmm.
But they shared Our Revolution Cambridge. Our Revolution Cambridge had the same endorsees
Oh, really?
as the residence lines, except they didn't have Patty Nolan. Well, Patty Nolan had a lot of ballots, so therefore, they suffer from
Yeah.
that. So for example, if you look at 1 through 5, actually 1 through 6, the residence lines had
Mhm.
got all, their candidates 1 through 6,
Yeah.
right? 489 ballots.
Oh. Huh.
Our Revolution 219, and the difference was Patty Nolan. Anyway, I don't
So
think those
wait,
numbers all that telling.
Burhan Azim was on the Our Revolution slate?
I don't know. He was not. He was
He was
not. He was
not.
on the Justice group, group of 5. How
Oh,
many
right.
ballots were there who voted 1 through 5 on that Justice Coalition? And the answer to that was only 106.
Interesting.
Right. So it's not a huge number. Right.
Interesting.
So anyway, I wanted to maybe throw those numbers out first here,
Yeah,
just
very,
for those
that's
people who are going to
interesting.
try and
Yeah.
say, well,
It's
look
a
how well
mandate
we
and all
did
that.
here.
Right.
Honestly,
Yeah. It's all
give
about
it up. It ain't
incumbents.
there.
Yeah.
It
I
is
know.
so much about incumbency. And and the other side story in this election here is, and you can spin this a variety of ways as well, is
Yeah.
how fabulously well Sumbul Siddiqui did.
Yes.
Now, in my view, that's not because of any slate she was on. I think it was because of
Totally.
who she is.
Who she is and the way she ran this
Right.
city in
Yeah.
these COVID times and
Yeah.
school
So,
committee and everything. Yeah.
so, it worked out very well for her.
It's who she is as a
Also,
person and her character and everything.
voter
Yeah.
turnout up in the precincts where she's strong was
Yeah.
much higher than elsewhere in the city. I mean, voter
Fascinating.
turnout, I mean, the number of residents is more or less equally distributed amongst all the precincts.
Okay.
There are more registered voters in some places than others, but then there's more just higher turnout naturally in some places. I haven't worked out the
Oh, that would be
individual
interesting
numbers
to
yet, but
see. That would be
I'll get the voter history file soon, then I'll be able to do all that analysis. But for example, in wards 10 and 11, there were close to 3,000 people voting in each of those wards. You can contrast that with Ward 2, where there was about 1,000 people.
Okay, what Ward 2 is East Cambridge?
MIT, Newtown
so it was more
Court,
transient,
Washington
more newer.
Mills. Well, but
Oh,
no, but
those
the
are
people who
housing
voted,
projects.
yeah. So those the people who were voting there are largely those, right? Of course,
Yeah, but
Burhan
don't you have?
Azim did well.
But wait,
in one of
you
those.
have Ringe Towers, isn't that wards 10 and 11?
Yeah. So that's up around 11. So that's why you have some of the really big numbers there.
Well, it's also Symbol grew up there. Her
Exactly.
parents lived there. Yeah.
So so part of the reason why her
Yes.
numbers were so great,
Yeah.
and really, I mean, it was tremendously great. I think she
Yeah.
had the highest percentage.
Yeah.
I mean, I have some of these things written
Yeah.
down. I don't remember. But anyway, let's go take a look here at some of the results. Hopefully everything will be visible here. So again, I think everybody who's watching this program would know by now who was elected to city council. Was Siddiqui.
Can you move that up a little on your screen? Yeah,
Is
there
that
you
better?
go.
All right.
Well, if you want to see the whole.
No. I'm just looking at just the text.
Oh,
first.
that part.
In
Sure.
order of election. In order of election.
Right.
Okay. So, and that's, you have to understand how that works because of the transfers and PR count.
Oh, yeah.
So first elected was Sumbul Siddiqui, then Denise Simmons, Patty Nolan, Dennis Carlone, Mark McGovern, Quentin Zonovan, Burhan Azim, Alana Mallon, and Paul Toner. On the school committee side, it was Aisha Wilson, Freddie Fantini, Akriti Bambi, Rachel Weinstein, Jose Luis Rojas Villarreal, and then David Weinstein. Right. Now, how it actually plays out, of course, is a little bit different. And again, just to look at hopefully everybody can see the table here.
Yeah, I can see it.
Reasonable clarity. So, and there's a lot to be said about this. Sumbul Siddiqui did more than, in terms of number one votes, did more than twice as much as the nearest competitor. I mean, it's just extraordinary how well she did.
I know.
The quota was 2182. She got 4,124 number one ballots. Right. And and now one thing, I mean, again, people can interpret this different ways, but
Mhm.
the fact is that amongst some groupings of candidates, basically, you could also look at that as a level of dissatisfaction for some of the other candidates.
I agree.
She just stood out as the solid one,
Yep.
when a lot of the other ones were less solid, and so
Mhm.
she became much more attractive, largely because some of the others were less attractive. So um, and there's some candidates, I would argue people like Mr. McGovern or Ms. Mallon, who are somewhat dependent on the slates, basically, to kind of
Yeah.
bring them in. Whereas
Uh-huh.
somebody like Sybil Siddiqui in that slate, didn't necessarily, on the ABC slate, she was in like Flint no matter what. I would
Yeah.
argue same with Denise Simmons, quite
Yeah.
honestly.
Yeah.
So
Oh, wait, can you go back up? Denise Simmons is behind Stumble in your,
okay, so
know what
you
I'm
have to
saying?
see
And
that.
yet, yeah,
All
how
right,
did
so
that
that has to do
happen?
with the transfers, because
Oh, okay,
it's a matter of when do you reach quota.
I
Now,
see.
when
Okay,
Siddiqui does so superbly well, then
yeah,
she
all that
gives
stuff. Yeah.
1,942 ballots to other candidates. And by the way,
Mhm.
there was a huge difference between how those were distributed from the unofficial count to this final official count,
Hmm.
because of the problematic aspects of the Cincinnati methods. There's a
Which
different
is,
draw of ballots, and they distributed. There was swings of more. There were
yeah.
17 additional ballots counted, yet there were swings and totals of well over 20 for
Wow.
some candidates, because
Hmm.
of that somewhat random quality of the Cincinnati method. I
That's
think that's a
interesting.
discussion that needs to happen. We need to talk more about that
Although
this
I
coming
look at
year.
this and I see that Atlanta got most of those,
Not
which,
unexpected, not
right, because that's,
unexpected.
I mean, I'll
And,
be honest,
and
that's who I put as number
right.
two.
So what happens here
Yeah,
is
yeah,
I would have fully expected
yeah.
with Siddiqui's surplus that the
Uh-huh.
principal
Oh, then
beneficiaries
Denise too.
would have
Yeah.
been Denise Simmons and Alana Mallon.
And they
But
were. I see that.
right,
Oh, yeah.
McGovern also does somewhat well,
Yeah.
um,
Uh-huh.
by
Uh-huh.
being a well-known incumbent,
Sure. Yeah.
and then that changes the positions, the relative
Burhan actually
positions.
got more than Patty Nolan. Yeah. Just slightly.
Patty Nolan was not
Yeah.
on the ABC slate.
Yeah.
Burhan Azim was. So you'll see a little bit of a slate phenomenon there. Okay.
Okay.
So then
Right.
that kind of reorders
Yeah.
who's leading here. And then you
Mm-hmm.
get rid of the riffraff candidates.
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Exton basically
Yeah.
outdid Greg Morey in terms of low polling here, which is quite an accomplishment.
Yeah.
But
Really.
after you count out Exton, Morey, Levy,
Oh,
uh, Franz Pierre actually was counted out with. So now you start to get into some real numbers. They
yeah.
get 384
Sure.
ballots being distributed, but they kind of
Right.
went all over the map.
Yeah.
And then Tonya Hicks,
Tony Hicks.
who's a very nice person, but honestly,
Mm-hmm.
everybody's favorite feeder too.
Yeah.
So people are saying, "Oh, be on my slate, be on my slate. We want those ballots to
Mm-hmm.
come to me," right? So actually, Nicola Williams, even though she was an ABC endorsed candidate, Nicola Williams actually
Mm-hmm.
does better on the Hicks's transfers than anyone else. Right. All right. So we're
Mm-hmm.
sort of racing ahead. Then we're down to
Yeah.
Dana Bollister, who was technically on the CCC slate,
Yeah.
but was not,
Was missing in
shall we not say,
action. Yeah.
was, kind of missing
Missing
in
in
action,
action. Yeah.
not the most
Mm-hmm.
enthusiastic member of the slate.
No.
So her ballots transfer, but you can see actually Burhan Azim does better because
Hmm.
this is sort of an age thing, I dare say.
Sure. Yeah.
Even though, so Bollister arguably is a CCC endorsed candidates, Burhan is an ABC. So you can really see the
Yeah.
slates kind of just not
Right.
being a factor in some of these transfers.
Huh.
Then you come down to Joe Mcgrick. Not surprising to those of us who knew what was going on. Joe's biggest
Yeah.
beneficiary is Paul Toner, and they were
Huh.
practically running as a tag team in a lot of
I
as
thought
candidates.
Market. Oh, were they? I thought
I think
initially
Mark
it was
McGovern
Market.
wanted,
Yeah.
to be a great
Yeah.
beneficiary. But
Yeah.
so you do see people like Alana Mallon and Mark McGovern picking up fair number because of
Mhm.
the ABC connection there.
Okay.
So then that leaves us with probably the person who probably was most disappointed in the results was Theodore Skiatis,
Yeah.
who spent a fortune,
All
raised and
right.
spent a fortune but
Did she?
really,
Yeah.
yeah, but really didn't come close at all. So when she got counted out, her ballots sort of move all over the place,
Yeah.
So she was not really linked to any. She may have been
Mhm.
on this justice slate, but that was sort of a non-factor.
Yeah.
And that leaves us with, at the end of that, there was only a 31 vote gap between
Oh,
Quentin Zondervan and Nicola Williams, but it wouldn't have
you're
mattered anyway.
kidding. Oh, because of
Had
G
that
Van's
gap
vote. Yeah.
closed and then
Mm,
Nicola Williams been ahead of Zondervan, then
mhm.
Zondervan would have lost and had been counted out. And then his ballots would have promptly catapulted Sabrina Wheeler way past
Ah,
Williams, so
I
that
see.
Nicola Williams was not going to win this,
So
no matter
either
what.
way, either G Van or
It was
Quentin would
going to,
have
it was
knocked her out.
basically a
Yeah.
trade. Yeah,
Okay. Yeah.
exactly. And by the way, you can really see this a lot more
Mm,
if you look, let me not do the board in precincts, but if you look at things
yeah.
like the number 2 vote distributions, you
Yeah.
can see, for example, so this is actually in order of number 1 votes. If you look
Okay.
at Zondervan's ballots, the
Yeah.
top beneficiary of next choice would have been Sabrina Wheeler,
Sure.
at
Okay.
27.6%, but
As it
perhaps more
was for
significant.
Azim too. Yeah.
Right, but if you look at Sabrina Wheeler's number 2s,
It's
Zondervan is at
Zondervan. Yeah.
38.5%. So,
And
so
then
the thing
Mallon and
is,
Siddiqui. Yeah.
basically, you were going to get one of
They
them, but
exchange.
not
Yeah.
both of them.
Hmm.
So
Right.
anyway, and I think
Right.
Azim
Interesting.
expressed some unhappiness with the fact that his friend,
Oh,
I think
really?
he and Sabrina Wheeler, kind of were simpatico, that somehow his winning was at the expense of Sabrina Wheeler. But hey, look, that's the way
Not
the cookie
really.
crumbles. Well,
Yeah. Then
arguably,
don't run. If you don't want to run against an incumbent, don't run. I mean,
that's right. That's right.
or did he really think that, well, maybe he thought
Ultimately,
they could both win. Yeah.
the only real question is, are the people properly represented? The individual fortunes
Yes,
of candidates, that's up
that's
to
right.
them to cry in their beer or hoist the
Yeah.
beer about over. But
Well, I think the younger population should feel okay that they've
yeah,
got some
one
still
other
youth. I mean, Sumble's young, but she's
yes,
also
yes.
reasonable in many
Yeah.
ways.
So one of the other results that I've always found interesting is to look at
Mhm.
what I call alternate measures of popularity. If you look at not at just ones,
Oh,
but ones and twos, 1, 2s, and 3s,
okay.
top
Oh, and
2,
who
top
gets
3,
the most
whatever.
ones and twos?
Yeah, so in terms of number ones, we know
Oh,
that
look
that's
at
just the number
Nolan.
1 vote
Yeah.
distribution. But if you say,
Wow, look at
okay,
this.
how many people were ranked either 1 or 2? Siddiqui is just at
Yeah,
the top of the ticket no matter what. But what you do notice,
interesting.
the things like Azim, after the number 1s, he just drops right off the charts,
Interesting. So he
right?
basically got in because of the transfers, you think,
Yes.
or especially
If you,
G Van's
but if you look
transfers.
at Paul Toner, same story. He starts
Oh,
off
right.
number
Yeah.
4 in number 1s, but if you get how many
Yeah.
ballots had him in either
Sure.
1 or 2, he's down in 10th,
Yep.
and then 11th and 12th around
Yeah.
there. Okay.
I mean, there's like the Craig Kelly.
If you look
story,
at Nicola Williams, on the other hand, in number 1 votes, she gets
yeah.
1,159 of them, but she's in 11th place. But then
Mhm.
if you count first or second, she's 8th, and then
Yeah.
7th,
Yeah.
right? 8th,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
basically, if you were
You
just
really
based
have to be in the top 4 or 5.
right, but it is not, you don't get elected basically by being
No.
everybody's favorite number 2
No.
choice. That's the
No.
unfortunate reality.
No.
By the way, in the school committee, I'll just say quickly here
Oh, yeah.
that
Talk
Aisha
about
Wilson
money
also
spent.
did
Jeez.
phenomenally well.
Yeah. How much did she spend? I mean, she's an incumbent.
I do have some of that information.
I think
I forget.
a Creedy Bombi spent more than all of them combined. I was adding it up, or almost. I mean,
Yeah,
it was
so
like 2020. I mean, it was just incredible.
Yeah, so the numbers, if everyone can see this here,
Yeah, I can
is
see
Akriti
this,
Bombi
yeah. Oh, there you go.
received almost 66,000, spent over 32,000 so far. Remember, there's still there's going to be a lot more expenses
But
that'll
look
be
at this
recorded by
figure.
end of
That's
the year.
65 versus 6,000, 5,000,
I know it.
4,000.
Rachel Weinstein was a
Unbelievable.
distant
Well,
second
actually,
place.
Rachel,
Well,
and
but she
Aisha
did
did
she
spend
did it 2
17,
years
but
ago.
still.
2 years ago, Rachel Weinstein also spent a fair amount of money. But
Yeah,
I mean,
that's incredible.
I mean, I don't
know.
actually have it right here, but I will
Mm,
say that,
yeah,
very soon, or I will start
yeah,
publishing the rather
yeah.
embarrassing dollars spent per
Oh,
number one vote
oh, right, yeah.
figures, where it looks sort of shocking for some, where it's
Yep,
like,
I know,
basically
I know.
bribery would have been a much more effective campaign strategy,
Mm,
you know.
I don't know. Okay.
Yeah, but if you're dropping, over $50 per number one vote, and sometimes I've seen some really spectacular results which are over 100, you know, it's a little embarrassing. There were candidates like Freddie Fantini historically would always basically they're the cheapest game in town. You know, they're spending $1 or $2 for a number one vote.
Yep, no,
Patty Nolan
he
usually
gets my
does really well
votes.
in terms of
Yeah, right,
efficiency
right.
of votes as well,
I'd be
both on school
curious to
committee
see
and this.
where, at some point, I'll have to do it on the show, where, her vote came from,
Yeah, I mean, you can look at the
which
board and
wards, yeah.
precincts. Some of the candidates are very, very heavily concentrated in certain precincts. Patty Nolan's voter base is pretty
Oh, sure,
concentrated,
yeah.
part of Ward 9.
I was speaking specifically of the school committee, yeah.
Yeah, and you can see the school committee too. It was actually quite interesting going through the school committee data and
Uh-huh.
sort of see. I mean, yeah, it was the top 6, but if you actually look at the sort of patterns in there,
Yes,
you see a certain amount of kind of racial identification in the patterns, but it
hmm,
was not as overriding a factor as I
no,
would have expected. For
yeah,
example, Aisha Wilson's number ones, who's the top candidate number behind her? I
okay,
might have thought it could have been somebody like Carolyn Hunter,
yeah.
Rachel Weinstein,
Oh,
but then
really?
again,
Oh,
she
wow,
also did very well generally in the
true,
election,
yeah.
so,
All right, we
anyway,
have like 20 seconds left, so,
there's
we'll
plenty
keep,
more, and
yeah,
I'll just, if anybody has
yeah,
any suggestions on what other information I can
yeah,
pull from the ballots, just send me an email
okay.
and I'll
And we'll
be
see you
happy to
next
point it
month
out.
after, Thanksgiving and all that stuff.
That's right. So
All
anyway, see
right,
you soon
take
on Cambridge
care,
Inside
bye.
Out.